Okay, welcome everyone. It is Wednesday, September 28th. It is 6:32. This is a regularly scheduled select board meeting. I'm Roger Arnold. I'm joined by Mary Layton, Vice Chair, Marcia Calloway, Aaron Lamperti, and Robert Gear. This is a remote only meeting, which means there's no physical location to participate contemporaneously. It's in accordance to the temporary provisions of the open meeting law. All right, so we'll begin our meeting. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. So two things that I want to note. One, a draft agenda that I had circulated included the appointment of a zoning administrator. That was removed in the agenda that we have because we need to hear from the Planning Commission. They need to make a recommendation and then we formally approve. So that is the process that we had in the past. So I wanted to explain that difference. And then we did have an agenda item addition in the form of a grant for Route 132 work. This was work that was part of FY22 and is, and the reason why it's a late addition is just because of the mechanisms of the time frame. We received notice, and in order to meet the deadline, we need to discuss before the deadline arrives before our next meeting. And we've provided substantial information, and we'll take some time to go through it, and all that information will be published in a subsequent packet. Okay, so with all that said, I would like a motion with an addition to the Route 132 materials. All right. The bridge, yeah.
I move to approve the agenda as amended to include discussion of a Route 132 culvert replacement.
Okay. Is there a second for the approval of the agenda?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any discussion on the approval of the agenda? Go ahead, Marcia. Mute. I'm sorry. It's okay.
Sorry. At what point are we going to put on the agenda the RFP for the listers? I know they've asked for that a couple of times.
Yeah, I think hopefully the next meeting. I mean, I think it's just been a difficult couple of meetings, but I think soon. I will say that I don't know the exact date in July in which we responded, but we have 150 days to respond from then. So while, we acknowledge what we need to do, but it's just been a while.
Okay.
So not so soon, I guess, but we can take it up in our agenda setting.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge it, but it just has been a difficult couple of agendas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So did anyone else have any disagreement with that? Okay, so not for future agenda items, which is actually an agenda item on our agenda, but we have a motion on the table.
For the motion,
yeah. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. All right, so the next item on the agenda is public participation. Are there any members of the public who would like to make a comment for items not on the agenda? So you can use your Zoom hand. There's a raise hand function, and then if you're on the phone, I think it's *9 to raise your hand. Okay, Stuart Richards, go ahead.
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. I mean, everybody at this meeting knows well that we have significant problems in town. We don't have a police force, a full police force. We don't seem to have people who are going to plow the snow this winter. We don't have a number of DPL licensed public service people. And the issues really have not been aired out publicly. So, I've been asking for, and in addition to lots of other people who have asked for, a public meeting to discuss the problems that we have, to have a question and answer period. And this has been ignored. It just really has been ignored by the select board. So I really feel that it's time, long past the time, actually, when we should know what is happening and what our future holds in terms of a police force in terms of having a public works department. So I just,
Okay.
I'll leave it at that. There's lots more to say about this, but I will leave it at that. I am hopeful, and so far it's been ignored, but I'm hopeful that at some point, sooner rather than later, this select board will have a question and answer period, a special meeting devoted to the questions and answers that really need to be answered, so that the public can have some comfort that you're doing the right thing. And thanks for hearing me out.
Sure. Thank you, Stuart. Any other public comments? So I moved my eyes around just so folks know in this instance, because I'm both looking at the time and then also looking for your Zoom hands. So I feel the need to clarify that. Okay, Demo, you are next.
Thank you, Demo Sophonis, 82 Glen Ridge Road. And Stuart stole the thunder from my sails, or the wind from my sails, whatever you want to call it. So I'll just read it because I have it right here. But I mentioned that I would be asking this again, and here goes. I would like to ask the board to schedule a question and answer period session as soon as possible as an agenda item, so that the residents of Norwich have an opportunity to ask questions. This will ease some of the tensions in town, calm the fears, and increase transparency. I don't see how I realize there's some legal issues that you probably can't, but there's no reason why you can't schedule something soon and just kind of calm everybody's fears, because there's a lot of tension in this town. I've never seen it like this before, and I've been around for a long time. So please consider doing this as soon as possible. Thank you, and thank you for working under these difficult situations right now.
Okay, thank you, Demo. Anyone else? Any other public comments? All right, I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to move on with our agenda. The next item on the agenda is the follow-up on discussion on tax payments, Vermont rebates, and town refunds. So Rod, I'm gonna turn it over to you to remind us where we left off in this discussion, because this is a follow-up of a previous discussion. So if you can quickly summarize, and then I imagine you'll probably turn it over to Fielding, is that right?
Yes, and we'll have some screen sharing. So good evening, everyone. As you actually, Roger, before I start, can you enable me to screen share?
Yes.
So as you might recall from the last meeting, Fielding had a connection from exactly the same spot, but it was pretty garbled, and it was a complex topic, and it was difficult to convey the information clearly. And so he and I have worked on this topic and come up with a set of images that we think that will be helpful for people to be able to relate to, and a series of sort of question and answers, frequently asked questions type format, so that people can have a better understanding of the issues at hand. So while I get set up, I'm going to hand this over to Fielding, and he can give you the highlights of what happened at the last meeting.
Yeah, that's a good approach. Thank you. Go ahead, Fielding.
Thanks, Rod. Thanks, Roger. So to kind of recap the problem that had arisen or has arisen, what we are seeing is a disconnect between mortgage escrow services and payments made to the town on behalf of the taxpayer by those mortgage escrow services. This is due to primarily our early tax due date. And the reason behind this, which we'll illustrate here with these screen shares, is primarily due to we are required to provide 30 days notice to taxpayers as well as these mortgage servicers of upcoming tax bills prior to their due date. Now in Norwich this year, our tax due date was August 12th, as I'm sure you're all aware, which required us to send notice no later than July 12th this year. Where the disconnect comes is ultimately that we do not receive our first payment from the state on behalf of the taxpayers that do qualify for an income sensitivity payment as part of their homestead declaration that they're required to file each year. I think the first point that I want to make, and I think really highlights the crux of the issue, is that when you file your homestead declaration, and if you do qualify for a homestead sensitivity payment, it is important to note that your tax bill, the overall taxes due on a given parcel, do not decrease. What does decrease is the amount owed by the taxpayer out of their own pocket. Effectively, the state and the taxpayer both make payments to on a given parcel's overall tax due. So Rod, if you'll scroll down a little bit on this tax bill that you have shared, you'll see this reflected on a tax bill. So here we have highlighted the total tax amount for a given parcel. In this case, it's $6,812.72. That is the amount of tax that will be collected by the town and the school district ultimately, as we'll explain in a minute, for this given parcel. This number does not change. What does change is the amount of net tax due from the taxpayer. That is due to a state payment, which is reflected just below the total tax line that they qualify for as part due to their income as part of the homestead declaration process. This payment is made by the state, and in Norwich's case goes directly to the school district. The town of Norwich never collects this. It is reflected on their tax balance, the balance due. However, it is not reflected in our tax system until that payment is made by the state. The earliest the state makes these payments is the middle of July. It's typically the second or third Wednesday in July. In this case, in this year, that date was 7/14. The result of the state payment does reduce the net tax due from the taxpayer, which you see and is reflected on the tax bill. However, Rod, if you'll switch to the tax admin, this is basically, this shows the accounting of how these transactions work. So on 7/7, after we had our special meeting to set the tax rate, everybody's tax bill is generated. We enter the tax rates into NEMRIC. The tax bills are generated. They are then immediately mailed out to every taxpayer. However, tax bills are not received by the mortgage escrow companies. They request, through a public records request, what's known colloquially as the First American file. This is primarily handled by a company called CoreLogic, but there are several other companies that request this file as well. This is industry standard. There's no alternative really in terms of how we can present this information. What they receive is effectively a summarized version of what you're looking at here, which is our internal accounting. Think of it like a statement. If you've ever, had an account with Dan & Witts, or if you've had an account with a hardware store, this is a statement of what is due and what payments have been made. So here you can see at the top on 7/7, the two 50% payment, or 250% totals due for their tax bill, the $6,812.72 divided into 2 equal payments. Then you can see on 7/14, the state makes 2 equal payments to each of those amounts due, lowering their tax bill to $4,114.72. However, because that payment is not made until 7/14, I'm unable to relay this information to the mortgage servicer. They then remit the full amount, the $3,406.36 that is due for the first half payment between both the state as well as the taxpayer. So when we receive the payment from the mortgage servicer, applied to the remaining balance on the account. So in this case, you'll see $3,406.36 is received. It is then applied to the second. It covers the amount due from the taxpayer. It then, the additional $1,349 is then applied to the second payment that is due on February 10th this year, or well, technically next year, but the second payment of this fiscal year. We've also provided a brief example, and it shows what the file looks like that the mortgage servicers actually receive. And so this is a summarized version of this statement here. And Rod, if you'll bring up that notepad file.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Back when you said on the statement payment from the state payment was on 7/14, and therefore you couldn't send anything to the escrow agent. I didn't understand why. Why does 7/14?
They request 30 days ahead of time, and we are required to provide a balance due 30 days ahead of time. That is guided by Vermont statute. That is also the industry standard within the mortgage industry, because most states have a similar statute on the books. You are required to provide at least 30 days notice of a tax bill being due. So we are dictated exclusively by statute on this matter. We do send follow-ups, which is what we'll show here. So I'd like to point out real quick before Rod brings up the notepad file, the balance remaining due on this one parcel is $708.36. So what I've done is I've generated what this CoreLogic file looks like after all of these payments have been made, after this first go round with taxes for this year. And
so okay, Rod, were you going to say something additional?
Yeah, I think I need to switch out my share screen function. So let me just see if I can get this.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Are you getting it now?
Yes.
yes,
Great. Okay. So Fielding, just quickly, this is the file that we generate and send to organizations like CoreLogic. I'm just going to scroll through really quickly so people get the idea of the kind of information that's contained in that without necessarily gleaning exactly what their neighbors are doing.
That would be great. Yeah. Okay.
But
So
that's what we transmit.
okay. So let's stop with this.
Yeah, that's good.
the point we're trying to make is it just transmits a balance, and it says this amount is owed on this parcel.
So hold on one second. Who is it transmits? So who's the it that transmits what we just saw?
I generate this file within NEMRIC at their request, which they file a public records request for.
Okay.
I then send that file to them.
Okay.
Part of this public records request is I fill out a form to CoreLogic that states when our tax bills are due, how many tax bill payments are made throughout the year, and their current due date, and their successive, you know what I mean, the due dates of them.
And so just to be clear, and Marcia also has her hand up, is it actually a public records request as like, we all understand it? Like, what do you mean? Can you just clarify that? Is it actually a public records request, or they just seek information from you and you send it because
they request this information, and they requested actually much earlier than 30 days notice. In our case, I can't provide that because we have such an early due date and we don't get the education tax rates from the state. So it has resulted in them filing a public records request to force the issue.
Oh, fascinating. Okay.
Yeah. Typically, but there is a big benefit. Typically, there is a big benefit for the town. Like we have increased, payments as a result. These mortgage servicers, we play ball with them. They file timely. They submit. They send us millions of dollars through this system. So, the net benefit to the town, and it's really easy to provide this information to them ultimately. The problem we are experiencing is because of our early tax due date,
Mhm.
we do not have the payments from the state. And so I send them this file and it shows a total amount due to the town, and it does not reflect the amount that has been paid by this, or will be paid, I should say, by the state.
Marcia, did
In
you,
researching this for this topic today, I have reached out to a couple other towns. Oh, do you have a question?
just let's take Marcia's question and then like that, and then go forward. So go ahead, Marcia.
Okay.
So basically you're saying that the state payment information is the driver here, right? Because we're not getting that. And I'm presuming that what we need to give in notice is particular information about the exact amount of tax. Here, it's not sufficient to just say, hello, our taxes are going to be due on this date.
Correct. I have to provide the tax amount due to them as well.
And we're waiting for the state completely.
And what the driver is we're waiting for the payment from the state. In most cases, we've been notified what the state, and the taxpayer has been notified of what the state is going to pay. However, they have not made that payment yet. So the full balance is still shown as due on the account.
Right.
So can't we adjust that and say, yeah, we know that's going to be the amount, and so.
Unfortunately, I cannot do that. This is actually these payments and these the notification to our tax system is sent by the state. It's directed by the state. All I can do is accept it into NEMRIC and apply it to the tax parcel.
I get that. I'm just wondering if, because we have knowledge of what it's going to be, is that sufficient to say to the escrow agents, this is what it's going to be?
No.
Unfortunately not. And I'll give just one example as to why. So the state, unfortunately, does not guarantee payment on that 7/14 date, for example. The state can and will make these filings and these payments to the school district up to mid-November. Typically every Wednesday, they make a transmittal.
Okay.
Typically the November ones are people who late file and they're going to have problems no matter what. However, the state does make payments every Wednesday. So it's not guaranteed that we will receive these funds prior to the even prior to the first tax due date. The state can and will often remit later on. So the full balance is still due. Now the state does make the vast majority. Like on 7/14 last year, we received 985,000, give or take. On 7/14, I think we've received a total of 1.1 million to date, or the school district has received 1.1 million to date. So you can see the vast majority is made on that first date, that 7/14 in this example transmittal, but not all of them.
I do, Marcia, I do want to get to the frequently asked questions, because hopefully like some of our questions might be answered in like what will become frequently asked questions. And then I'll take your comment after that, if that's all right.
Okay.
Yeah, we do need to proceed. So Fielding, can you just resume what you were saying? You mentioned that you reach out to other towns and that you then have these list of questions that you're going to like prime us, share with us.
So I've conferred with both our auditor, and while we are rare in terms of having such an early tax due date, in fact, we have the earliest tax due date in the entire state. There are a couple other towns that do have tax due dates that are in August. And speaking with them, I found the closest probably comparison to Norwich is Stowe, Vermont, which has quarterly tax due dates. And their first is August 15th. The driver, what is consistent across all the towns that have August due dates, that does not apply to Norwich, in my opinion, as the finance director, is that they have cash flow necessities that require them to have such an early tax date. Norwich is very fortunate in its current financial status to not have these cash flow requirements, at least for August. That can always be adjusted in the future if things change, hopefully not, but it can be. But that has been consistent. What I have found, and notably with Stowe, which has a very high tax base, high grand list number, and a similar similar demographics in a lot of ways. It's hard to get it exact, but is that they encountered this problem as well, and they have pushed it back to the taxpayer in terms of, they require payment if the mortgage servicer pays more than required for that quarterly payment. They are not going to return funds to anyone. The taxes are still ultimately due to the town. They keep it. It does create strife, but they have cash flow necessities for it. The reason I did want to bring this up to the board and brought it up last board meeting, and we're continuing to discuss it today, is that I do feel the town is in strong enough financial position to at least entertain the idea of pushing back their tax due date. The reason behind this is it will allow us to capture most of the income sensitivity payments made by the state, which will then be reflected in the information that I send to mortgage servicers, and then they will make correct payments as a result, which is why we're discussing this today. So I did just want to point that out. There are other towns that do have, they're few and far between, but there are other towns. And the reason they require such an early tax due date is primarily and almost exclusively for cash flow reasons.
Okay.
Reasons that Norwich does not have right now.
Thank you, Fielding. So like Marsha, I want to move you along a little bit with appreciation. Can we get to these questions? Can you quickly summarize them, because I recognize that maybe not everyone can squint at the screen, right?
Okay, so Roger.
Yes.
Let me. This is my end of the deal. I can increase the.
Okay.
I can manipulate the screen a little.
Okay. Okay, and so let's very, you're provided in-depth answers, and I assume that this will be available somewhere.
Yeah, we'll put this up on the website somewhere, and we'll let people know through a link at the listserv. So this is really just a compilation of the kind of points that Fielding's already gone over, and we tried to organize it in a way that ordinary taxpayers could follow. So some of the questions that have come up in the last couple of weeks include, why the change, right? And so and I think that the answer there is that previously, at least for a couple of years, Norwich would refund the amount that the state committed to pay using that income sensitivity formula, but as Fielding has gone to some pains to explain, and as we've tried to illustrate by reviewing the bill, it's not our money to refund, right? And so it ends up causing accounting issues for us and potentially issues for the school as well. But it was done in good faith, and it was done in an effort to resolve people's personal situations, but it's not the appropriate approach given the way given appropriate accounting procedures, is what I'll say. So the key point that Fielding was making is that crucially, the bill is the bill. The total amount due is still the total amount due. It's better for people to think of when you're receiving income sensitivity payments from the state, that the state is helping you as a taxpayer by making a contribution to your bill, not that they are reducing the total bill, right? So that's a key ingredient. And the other part here that's really critical to understand is the town has the responsibility for collecting all the taxes, both for the school and municipal taxes, right? And then we pass on the school taxes to the school district, and then the state sends their money directly to the school district. They do not send it to the town. So we do not receive money from the state on behalf of Norwich taxpayers. We've gone through a little bit of the whole issue to do with how this really works and how it can be exacerbated. Those people that file their homestead tax declarations really late are going to be at the end of the line, and that information is going to be late in being generated, and then that's going to impact their bills, and that's going to kind of escalate. So there's a way in which, your sort of worst case scenario would be somebody that's recently refinanced, that's qualifies for income sensitivity payments, has not followed what's going on with the mortgage service provider, and files their homestead tax declaration very late in the piece for whatever reason. And the state, somewhat problematically, will receive a homestead tax declaration anytime between April 15th and October 15th. This is a really anomalous situation in the tax collection world. Typically, states say what the due date is, and it's not a 6-month period. It's like you owe it on a day.
Right.
And so I think that the last part about this, that why is this a bigger problem this year? Many people took advantage of low interest rates to refinance, and in doing so, they've changed their mortgage service provider, either consciously or without their knowledge. So the other thing that's happened because of that refinancing is that the escrow recalculations have had to take place. So there's been a really significant fluctuation in the way their tax bills calculated and processed from this year compared to previous years, right? So if you had a stable setting, you know, with a 30-year mortgage, and then all of a sudden you refinanced, it's going to look really different. And the people that you're going to be working with on this problem could also be extremely different. And then we've talked about the due date problem. So in conclusion, the easiest solution for us is to push back the due date for taxes, and push it back far enough so that we can get the information from the state, and most people have that information at hand before we start sending out tax bills. It doesn't have to be a long pushback. Miranda, working with us, looked at all the other towns in the Two Rivers Regional Planning Commission area and found a range of dates. Heartland, for instance, the due date is middle of September, I believe. So it wouldn't take a significant change in the due date. And in fact, Fielding and I have discussed informally, it could be as close to the current date as just the end of August, right? Which would then allow the finance office to close out, do the end of year closeout. Remember, July 1 is or June 30th is the end of the financial year. So the finance office is confronting this huge workload associated with closing out the financial year. And then in this context, on top of that, is also inundated with a huge tax payment, and then all the associated work with that. And then not too long after that, then they turn around and start doing the budget. So even if from our point of view, from a management point of view, just pushing back the due date 2 or 3 weeks would make a huge difference to our workflow, and a huge improvement to our accuracy, and reduce a lot of the conflict that taxpayers experience as well as us. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure Fielding can too.
Sorry, can
That's okay.
people hear me? My whole screen went gone.
Oops.
People can hear me now?
Mhm.
Yes.
So I caught the end. I think Rod was closing up. So we're entertaining questions now. Is that right? Sorry, I had my unstable internet connection. So I saw we're doing Zoom hands, which is interesting. So I saw Rob's first, and then Mary, and then Marcia.
So as I look at the information, the date is set by warrant and the town meeting, correct?
Yes.
So this year is a done deal. We can't do anything about it. Next year, we can certainly look and find the most appropriate date, due date for taxes. Correct.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We can prepare the warrant for the voters who make the decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Rob. Mary?
I just wanted to say, I understand this completely, thanks to the work that was done. I appreciate that you brought it back, because it was hard to hear Fielding last year. So I'm just appreciating the effort by both Fielding and Rod.
That's great. Thank you, Mary. Marcia?
Yeah, I'm still not entirely sure, because to me, it seems like there's competing harms here, and the taxpayer is probably less able to bear the brunt of the harm. And I'm just thinking, is there, I'm wondering if there's some, edict on high that says we can't treat that state notice as gospel and, provide the notice to the escrow agent. So that's kind of question number one, but question number two is, as we are collecting all the taxes, the downstream flow is to the school. So has anybody asked the school what the impact on it is if there's a change in date of collection of taxes?
So let's get the second question first, and then let's go back to the first one, because I'll ask you to clarify the competing harms, because I lost you on that. So let's get the second question first. Go ahead, Rod and Fielding.
Let me answer this really quickly. Yes, we've had informal conversations with Jamie Teague, the finance director for the school district, and she is more than happy to adjust the due date or the tax payment, the date that we send them taxes. They don't have a cash flow issue. They don't have a problem with it. They think it's a good idea that we adjust it.
Okay, and then Marcia, can you quickly name what harms are competing and then rephrase your question, just because I don't think we understood it, or at least I did. Thanks.
Just basically the taxpayers are complaining that they're having to pay more because of this whole process this year. And we are in a stronger position financially. So I'm thinking, where is the problem with us relying on the state's notice and acting as though the money was received, even though it's not going to be received until whenever? We can bear the brunt.
Let me just respond to that really quickly, Marsha. The key point here is it's not our money to refund, right? So
we're not refunding, are we?
Yes, effectively that's what we've been doing in the past.
Right.
So that's a practice that we cannot continue.
So there's no way to do it without refunding money.
No, the action that you would need is to refund money that we don't control to the taxpayer.
Okay.
That is what, can I jump in real quick?
Yes, please.
That is what the taxpayer is requesting, because their escrow payment then gets recalculated and they kind of lose the benefit of an income sensitivity payment being made on their behalf if they then have to just turn around and pay that monthly to their mortgage company. They eventually do get that back when I send this file again in January and the mortgage company sees, oh, only $708 is due, and then they recalculate their escrow payment again, and then they get a check a year later, which, yeah, they get the money, but it's a long time to get it. From the mortgage company's standpoint, though, their biggest concern and why they request 30 days, and we give it to them, is ultimately the mortgage servicer wants to ensure that the taxes are paid on time and they will not be at risk of the property going to a tax sale. Now in Norwich, we're not going to do that. Our tax collection policy doesn't allow for that, but some towns might, and mortgage companies can't really make judgment calls on each given town. They have their own internal policies, and so given that the state does not always make the payments on time, and a couple, some other factors, there's a couple hundred pages of tax law here that we're trying to condense, but
yeah,
ultimately the mortgage servicer wants to ensure that the taxes are paid on time so that their investment and their risk is mitigated, just like the taxpayer doesn't want to have the payment be made late either, because then interest accrues and their tax bill only gets larger. So everybody's trying to keep the payment down, basically.
So, okay, so we're over time on this agenda item, as Fielding said. We, the only thing, so we're over time on this agenda item. So, I think the recommendation is clear. We could take action on that recommendation if we would like, or not, or we can just carry this over as a discussion.
I'd like to carry it over.
So I could either take a motion or I can move on to our next agenda item.
A motion, are you suggesting that we make a motion to move our tax collection date? Is that what you mean?
I think that was that was a clear recommendation from our presentation, but if we don't if we do not want to do that, we can take it up at another time.
Well, we could take it up, for instance, during budget season.
We can.
Or when we're figuring out what's going on the warrant. That seems like a good time to do it, I think.
Yeah, the warrant time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So I see Aaron's hand and then I see Marcia's hand.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. Let's table it until we're actually writing the warrants.
Great. But as long as we okay, I think we're good. So
We'll remember, don't worry.
I hope we do.
We will remember.
Hope we do. Because this
It's
was
important. Yeah.
we'll Wednesday, September 28th. We'll refer back to this recording. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for that. I'm going to move us on. Okay, I see your hand, Linda. I see your hand, Linda. Okay. Would you like to make a public comment really quickly, because we do need to move on?
Yes, I'm just wondering when or if does the taxpayer ever receive the payment? Is it just during the recalculation of the escrow that the money would come from them? Because you've got a year here that you are putting a burden on people.
That would be completely dependent on your individual mortgage company. Escrow accounts do have pretty strict federal regulations around them. They need to be recalculated, I believe, at least on an annual basis. When that occurs, though, I cannot guarantee you it's going to be completely dependent on your individual mortgage company and your situation with them.
I'm just hoping that's something that will be clear to anyone that's receiving the income sensitivity, so they're not surprised by it at the end. I'm hoping that can be made clear.
I think the suggestion has been if we move the deadline, things would be cleaner and more understandable for the taxpayer. But thank you, Linda, very much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So with apologies, we're going to move us on because we're over.
Stop beeping.
Yeah, there she goes. She figured it out. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Next item is the town. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Fielding and Rod. Next is the town manager's report.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Rod.
Thank you, Roger. So good evening again, everyone. So just really quickly, in response to the continued struggles that we're having around recruiting CDL licensed drivers for the equipment operator positions at Public Works, and in recognition that other towns are experiencing similar issues of having existing staff recruited away by private companies and constant staff turnover and shortages, we are attempting to organize a sub-regional meeting. We've had some interest from towns of Thetford, Hartford, and Sharon, and we're looking to explore how to develop mutual aid agreements so that we can support each other in the coming winter months. There's a great level of interest among DPW staff and managers to do something about this, and we're working with the Two Rivers Regional Planning Commission on that as well. On other questions concerning staffing and recruitment, there's been several questions posed here and in Public Record Act requests. The Select Board has made a statement with regard to some of the questions around workplace culture and recruitment efforts, and those are available on the town webpage. And then lastly, under recruitment and staffing, it is my sad responsibility to announce tonight that Fielding Ascensor, our finance director, is going to move on. Fielding's last day will be October the 5th. And just want to say that it's been absolute pleasure working with Fielding, and he's made an enormous contribution to the day-to-day operation of the town, and he'll be greatly missed. And I think Roger might want to.
I just really want to really quickly. I took some notes, but I think it's really important that we publicly recognize, right? Fielding, we organized the finance office, including its filing systems, its organization, and we now have new electronic file structures, which was undoubtedly helpful to the support of department heads and staff, including the training of 3 different finance assistants that we have had. I think we and the town got to know him really through the successful budget for FY22. Within the first 4 months of the job, we put together a comprehensive capital plan that we had adopted. It can always be improved, but it was for the first time in a very long time that the town had one. And then he also actively managed the FY22 budgeting. We've benefited frequently from hearing finance updates about the budget during extreme inflation. And we've also saw some significant savings through the reserve fund management, right? So I won't go anymore, but I thought, it's best to just summarize that a little bit. And then Rod, if there's anything else that you would like to say, that sounds like you said enough, we can move on to the rest of your report. Any other, so yeah, and board members, if you've, I know that Mary participated in the team to find a finance director. So I remember hearing from her that after they had interviewed Fielding, she felt relieved after multiple years to have found him.
No, I actually felt excited to find him. And I wish him well in his next position. I think he's an asset to any organization.
Thanks, Mary. Go ahead, Rob.
It's been a pleasure to see your transition from private industry to public service, and it was a joy to have you with us, and we'll miss you a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
I haven't worked with Fielding as much as the rest of you, but what I have seen and personally spent time with him, he is definitely clearly professional and personable. And as I understand it, he has set up the town to do our future budget efforts very, very well. And I certainly appreciate that effort. Thank you, Fielding.
That's great. Go ahead, Marcia. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry about that. So Fielding, good luck, and please be sure to leave us all of your notes and files because we will reference them.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Thanks so much for your kind words, guys. I really appreciate it, and thank you so much for the opportunity as well. I certainly appreciate it. I get my feet under me here and moved here from faraway lands in Idaho. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So Rod, are you going to tell us now what we're going to do about that and then move on to the rest of your report? You're on mute now.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit emotional here. So, well, there's not any easy way to replace Fielding, but we've gone back to our favorite temporary staff supplier, Robert Half, and we have a person coming tomorrow actually to have what they call a first day tryout. So there'll be a day-long interaction between a candidate and Fielding. We're hoping that this person will be happy to work in the town and be able to support us through this transition phase while we think about next steps. So we're optimistic that this is going to work out, but we'll let you know, I guess, next time.
Okay, thanks. All right, any other updates?
In somewhat more upbeat news, for those of you that are fans of the Winter Farmers Market, for the first time ever, we have a written agreement between the farmers and us about use of the space and those circumstances, and we've resolved a long-standing misunderstanding. We thought they wanted the building really warm. They actually want the building really cold. So this is a very happy coincidence because we don't think we really have heat, and we don't have to make excuses so badly anymore. So we hope that the building will be kept at 55 degrees and the doors will remain shut, which is the reverse of what things used to be, where the building was at 70 and the doors were open. So we're looking forward to having them, and we hope it works out. Some people mentioned in the last heavy rainstorm that there was a bit of movement on the recent work on Route 132 that was checked and repair, a minor adjustment made. It's still under warranty, so we're happy with the work so far, and we think it's going to hold. And then lastly, there's another posting to the town website with regard to recent Public Record Act request activity, which is ongoing, and a rough estimate of how much time and therefore money that's costing the town. It's now probably well over $4,000. So that finishes the town manager's report for me. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, go ahead, Mary.
Is there an update on possible hire a police chief?
Yes. Yep. Our background review company is still working. I've had an update this week that things are going very well and things are promising. So I'm hoping, as is the candidate, that there'll be some news very soon.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so we'll move on if there's no other questions. All right, thanks for all that. I think
Roger, are you taking any questions from the public?
not seeing any hands, and we're a little bit over time, so I would like to move on.
Here's one.
Okay, the way that you participate is you raise your hand on the bottom of the Zoom screen, and then you wait to be recognized, and then you'll state your name and locatable address, okay? So if you can just go push the raise hand button on the Zoom, and I'm saying this to all folks, right? That's the way to publicly participate. Okay, so go ahead, Mary Gorman, I will now take your public comment.
Thank you very much, Roger Arnold. Just curious,
can you state your locatable address for us?
Sorry, 504 Hawk Pine Road, Mary Gorman. Just a question, a couple of questions. One, will there be the HR consultant, will there be an exit interview going on with Fielding? And secondly, do we have a report on the number of town employees who have left within the past year, and perhaps people who have left within, like a year, 15 months of starting to work here? Their turnover is very disturbing.
So there was a color-coded document that was provided as part of a Public Records Act request, which is provided on the website. There's distinctions made between who is a temporary staff member and who is an A-line staff member, right? And so I'm sure if you review that document and have questions, town staff will be able to help that for you. And indeed, there's exit interviews for all employees that are conducted. So I'll move on now. Any board members have any questions for the town manager's report? All right, so we'll do that. And so just really quickly, if anyone has any comments or questions, raise your hand, right? So raise the hand little button on the bottom, and then *9 if you're on the phone. And then if you ask your question, address them to me, and then I will try to get them answered to you. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we'll go ahead, Mary.
This is not to do with the town manager report, but
Okay.
when it's actually going back to approval of the agenda.
Okay.
So at what point were we going to consider that mitigation grant?
Yeah, I know. I always forget that part. I think we wanted to do it after agenda item 8, I think is what Rod suggested to me.
After 8, okay.
Is that fair? Does that work for everyone? Okay.
What, 8A or something?
Go ahead, Rod. Did you have a suggestion? Yeah. Did you raise your Zoom? Yeah, raise your Zoom hand, sir. All right, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, I'm so glad I found it. It would be preferable, I think, if we could handle it before the break.
Okay.
Really quickly.
Yeah. All right. Does that make sense for board members?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do it right before the break after this.
Okay. After sand and gravel.
Yes, thank you, Mary, for your attention to that. All right, so let's go on to the replacement purchase of a sidewalk snowplow tractor. So do you want to give us a broad overview, Rod, and then we'll...
Yeah, let me open this by saying that I really appreciate the quality of the work that I'm receiving from the DPW director and the level of detail. So those of you that have read the memo, I doubt that you've got any outstanding questions, but to try and knock a few on the head before they even start is there an electric or a hybrid or a non-fossil fueled snowplow suitable for this work? And the answer is no. If there was, we would have looked at it and we would have given you a price estimate. But as far as we are aware, it doesn't exist yet. And so in brief, we don't have a lot of sidewalk, and our sidewalk is in very poor condition. That makes a equipment choice somewhat challenging. Towns with high quality, well-maintained sidewalks can justify spending larger amounts of money on highly effective, expensive pieces of equipment because it doesn't get damaged in the process of doing the work, and it lasts well, and they've got an extensive network of sidewalk that they're committed to maintaining, which enhances pedestrian activity and people getting out of vehicles. That's not Norwich. Norwich has poor sidewalks and a fairly short distance of sidewalks. And so it gets difficult to justify a significant expense for a purpose-built piece of equipment. What we're proposing here is a compact tractor, common throughout the United States, that's reliable and is easily serviced by a local vendor with a kit of equipment that manufacturer provides precisely for this purpose. And it's increasingly common in towns such as ours with relatively small amounts of sidewalk and sidewalks with really variable conditions. And so that's how we arrived at this recommendation. And the price of the estimate for this actually is less than the repair cost for the existing pretty old piece of equipment that we currently have. And so I'm happy to take anyone's questions, or we can just move to the part where we talk about the motion.
Let's take some questions. Go ahead, Marcia.
So the holder is 15 years old. I'm just wondering, what's the life expectancy of this little tractor? Do we know?
It's hard to say, because the nature of the service, what it's being asked to do. But if it's well maintained and well cared for, which is a distinction I want to draw with the existing piece of equipment, then I would expect it to last at least the same amount of years. It's in the end, probably what we'll get it is the availability of spare parts.
So, I mean, I think I think it's good that Marcia asked about life cycle costs. So life cycle costs we typically think about in capital planning. So was this, remind me, how anticipated was this expenditure in terms of, the capital equipment? It was hard to say because we learned more about it when, with the current stuff.
Okay, that's a good question. I appreciate that question. So when I became interim town manager, it was this time last year, and we were preparing for winter at that point with a different set of staff and that piece of equipment, the holder. And the verbal reports from the DPW staff at the time were that the holder was problematic, both in terms of its condition and its need for service and repair. Some minor work was done on it, and but it was acknowledged that it was problematic. We got through the winter with it. As part of this year's summer preparation program for winter, all of the vehicles that we are going to use in winter were put through rigorous service review, and the holder was part of that. It went to the only dealer in the Northeast of the United States. There's one in Canada as well, which is in Concord, New Hampshire, and it was there for more than a month. And it came back with that assessment from the dealer. And so we knew it had issues. We didn't know that the issues were that severe, and we didn't know it was going to cost that much. Once we got the repair estimate, I had a fairly strong reaction to the figure and suggested that we look at alternatives with a view to replacing it, because given the age of the vehicle and its resale value, it wasn't worth putting that much money into it. So it did change the capital plan. It brought it forward a little. We're making provision to replace the holder. We've got funds we've got money set aside for it in the reserve fund. It was an expected capital cost, but not this year.
Okay. Do we want to maybe take a motion and then have any more board member discussion?
Let's
Okay,
do that.
Okay.
I move to approve the purchase of a John Deere 1025R tractor with attachments from United Ag and Turf South Royalton for an amount not to exceed $44,777 to be paid from the Highway Equipment Reserve Fund.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. All right, any discussion? Aaron, how are you feeling about this fossil fuel purchase?
I recognize that there are no other options, and our facility for converting these little tractors is probably minimal, although we have someone in town who has done it. I would say probably, but I think one of the first things we're going to be able to get electric in this form will be a small tractor, not a purpose-built sidewalk sweeper. So, and likely a John Deere. So it's more likely that we will reuse the accessories if we did decide to convert in a few years. So I see this as a possible, probably a better path than a more expensive purpose-built machine that we would have to maintain for many years.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. Any other discussion? All right, I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. All right, authorize the gravel and salt bid. Can we begin with a motion for this one? I probably should have done that last time.
I move to authorize the town manager to accept the bid submitted by Twin State Sand and Gravel for $15.64 a ton, or $15.64 a ton delivered.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any discussion on this? Go ahead, Marcia.
Just wondering how this volume of material equates to what we ordered last year. In other words, did we have enough last year? Is this going to be enough, etc.?
Yeah, I think that's good. Can we hold that question and then we'll get, yeah, but thank you. Go ahead, Aaron.
Just a general question that I think has come up before. Have we asked the companies bidding to provide an embodied carbon number for their products, just as something we should start doing, keep it on the radar that we should be doing that with all purchases going forward?
Great. So why don't Rob, why don't you tell us about how this bid compares to last year's bid and what was left over and how, and address the spirit of Marcia's question, if that's okay. And then how was the RFP developed? Was it developed with embodied carbon numbers in mind?
So really quickly, as everybody knows, winters are changing in the pattern of winter is changing and the kind of events are changing. So we're getting more ice, less snow. The range of materials that we, so the type of materials that we use on certain days is changing. We came out of last winter with a pretty decent stockpile of both sand and salt. We were conscientious this year to make sure that we got enough on board, given the price fluctuations that we've been experiencing, particularly with delivery. And so we got relatively good prices and we're stocked right up. We don't expect to run short and we should be in good shape. On the embodied carbon question, I think it's a great question. We did not ask that. I think we should incorporate that into our bid proposal process. That being said, I'm sure these providers are getting to ask those questions from other suppliers, but it would be interesting to know if they've got that information at hand. As you might imagine, it's an interesting question. It's going to be really dripping in carbon. There's no other way of saying it. Like this is like soaked in it. The whole process is incredibly intensive in terms of carbon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Mary, did I see your hand up before?
No, I'm all set.
So Aaron, what information would you need to have an embodied carbon number, assuming that if we include it in our bid documents, the bidder might not know how to answer that question?
Well, there's standard ways of doing that I'm not, up on, but it's a standard number, and they'll probably have it because, well, anybody, a bigger supplier will have it, a smaller supplier might not. And,
Okay.
But it's a standard thing, and we can easily find out what the right question is.
And okay, so we're good. Did everyone, any other questions or comments? Okay, so I'll call the question then, if that's okay. Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. All right, so then we have our added agenda item. I confess that this was sent this before our meeting, so I only skimmed the materials, so we can go a little slower and understand it a little bit more. Rod, do you want to set us up a little bit?
Sure, I'm happy to. I'm not sure if it's helpful for people or not. I'm happy to share the screen if that makes it any better. I think I can give you the really condensed version, which is a prudent process for municipal government in Vermont is to have a capital plan that's developed and focus your attention on the infrastructure that is most important and most in need of improvement or repair. In this instance, the town has done that work. Route 132 is our responsibility, and it's an important connecting road, and it's an important road for us to maintain. And we've made a commitment to repave Route 132 in the near future, given its general condition. Part of that preparation process is to look at what's underneath the pavement, and that focuses on the drainage and other aspects of infrastructure. And so, as you know, we've been working on a large culvert, or to most people would probably look like a bridge, on Route 132 this summer. And this grant application furthers that work. So we've identified another culvert that needs to be replaced, and we've worked with the Two Rivers Regional Planning Commission and the engineering firm that they work with, Stantec, to develop this proposal that is eligible for grant support. And so the grant program is called the Environmental Mitigation Program. It's run from VTrans. It's basically a pass-through of federal money. And so it's an 80-20 split. 80% of the cost of the project would be borne by the federal government, but paid by VTrans, and 20% of the cost of the project would be borne by the town. We estimate that to be approximately $115,000. And we hope, if we receive the grant, that we would proceed with this work in the FY23, the summer of FY23. So not, so next summer, basically. So that is in a nutshell. Why did you not get it a week ago or with the packet? That's more complicated. Staff of the Regional Planning Commission are under a lot of duress. The engineering firm is under a lot of duress, as are we. We didn't receive the packet of information from the Regional Planning Commission and the engineering consultant until late Thursday afternoon. It took us that long to turn it around. And the reason why it's urgent is that the cutoff date for applying for the grant is October the 7th, which is the end of next week. And there's not a select board meeting between now and then for us to consider it. So this is it. So I apologize again profusely for the lack of time to review it, but that's it.
Okay. I have one quick question, Rod, which is, so we have Mary knows the name of it. Is it Marcan, the road thing? So
you mean our road analysis from long ago, the Marcan report?
Yeah. So we have these Marcan reports. I know that TROC did a culvert inventory. How is that past work being inform a recommendation like this? We should the board assume that the culvert inventory was consulted? Can you just
yeah. The easiest way to say that is that it is in fact the culvert inventory that led to the recommendation that this project be done, and led to the recommendation that we access these grant funds to do it. So this is an outgrowth of the culvert inventory work that we've done.
Okay. All right. Any questions? Go ahead, Mary, and then Marcia.
It's not really a question. I think this is very serendipitous and I'm familiar with the culvert and the drainage, which looks like a giant funnel coming down off of sort of a bluff. So I can intuitively understand when they say it's a large sort of catchment basement, and it is funneled into a very small, narrow opening, and then it goes under the road and then it drops down again. So I think this is really good that this is falling in our lap in this way. So, and I'm all for it. So.
That's great. Marcia?
She muted again.
It's okay. Yes, she realized.
Sorry, I'm trying to be quiet. So there's on one warrant here, there's over 200,000 for Vermont 132 excavating. And so I'm assuming that that is a separate cost from what we're talking about for this grant.
Exactly.
And then, okay. And then my second concern is that we've talked about poor grant management in town in the past. And I'm just kind of would like an update on how we are improving that, because anytime we have a grant, we have obligations and we want to make sure that we're not falling down on those.
So I think like the topic of like grant management is like a worthy one and long. But Rod, do you want to quickly address Marcia's question? I mean, I think also it's important to note that this work was envisioned for FY22, right? And so,
Right.
So, you know, we're responding accordingly. So, but go ahead. Marcia raises questions about like how are grants managed and tracked. Can you address that a little bit on a high level?
Sure. So the key thing is, yes, to emphasize Roger's point, this is a holdover from last year, which reflected where we were last year in terms of our staffing and our ability to support these things, including the finance office. So it's a reflection on our improved circumstances that, in fact, we were able to process this. The next point, which is probably more important and more relevant, is that we've been working really well with the Regional Planning Commission and the transportation planner there, and a large amount of the grant management oversight will be handled in conjunction with the work of the Regional Planning Commission. So we expect to be kept on task and kept on schedule, partly because the Regional Planning Commission will have a role in that, which is not to say that we don't have a responsibility in that, but that's the way our working relationship has evolved, and it's very effective.
Good, thank you.
I think Aaron and then Mary.
Just from my understanding as a newcomer, where does the money come from that we are 20%, and how does it affect the tax rate?
We have a reserve fund, Aaron. So there's funds already there. That it's the bridge reserve fund. Effectively, I think that's. I didn't give it its exact name, but that's what it's called. And it's fairly buoyant, I would say. And it's nice that Norwich has the funds to be able to maintain these reserve funds in this condition. And our contribution to this project would be about 115,000. And I think Fielding can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're sitting on around $600,000 in that fund.
$635,000.
So it leaves us room to do other work, and I think we're all set.
Okay,
Right.
thanks.
And so this is an FY22 project, and the capital plan covers FY23 to 27, right? So
Correct. So it's kind of a catch up.
go ahead, Mary.
Just briefly, I think grants were managed really well for the Route 132 box culvert that's already been installed. Beautiful installation. It's near my home. I've been to see it. Also out in Tigertown, very successful. So also our storm mitigation for 2017, very complicated, very successful. So yes, we've had some glitches with grant management, but we've also had some success and done really well with it. So we'll just hope going forward, we'll try to be successful and stay on top of it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rod, or Rob. Sorry. And then Marcia.
I attended the VLCT municipal budget workshop last week. And one of the things I thought was interesting that sort of applies here is that of the regulations that the state puts on budgeting, they anecdotally seem to place transportation and roadways highest on their list of what towns are responsible for and maintaining in good condition. There's significantly less regulation over other parts of town budgeting.
Great. Thanks, Rob, and thanks for attending. Go ahead, Marcia.
So I'm just wondering, this expense that I'm looking at on this warrant is coming out of the general fund. And shouldn't that be coming out of the reserve fund? And if so, don't we usually have warrants for reserve funds, separate warrants? Because you don't take things that are in reserve funds and pay them out of general, and then you pay them out of the reserve. So we should have a warrant.
Masha, with reference to this item before you, there is no commitment of funds yet. It's just the approval of a letter of support, and the draft letter of support was contained in the materials that were submitted to you. So there is no commitment of funds at this moment.
Yeah, I was referring to this one that's on the warrant.
Well, yeah, that's not the topic.
Oh, I know it's not the topic, but
All right. I think I get to help with this, right? All right. So we'll get to the warrant and we should ask those questions. And I think let's pull out that one question about when we approve an expenditure on a reserve fund, Rod, do we is there a warrant that is issued for the signature, or is the motion sufficient for the employees?
At this moment, the motion is sufficient, or just to agree to the draft, agree that the letter of support is appropriate, and then I'll sign it and I'll transmit it.
Yeah, no, I'm asking, I know that we're straying from the agenda item in question, but I think the question, which we can maybe ask rhetorically and then get an answer for, is, when we approve expenditures from reserve funds, is it necessary to sign a warrant for that reserve fund? We approve, and that is the question that Marcia asked as a sidebar. So let's get that question asked and we'll get that answered at another moment. Because to your point, Rod, we got to address this agenda item. So please help me out. Did I ask for a motion?
Nope.
Okay, so can I get one?
Are you ready for a motion?
Wait, yes,
Okay.
I'm ready for one. Thank you.
I move to approve submitting an application to the 2023 Environmental Mitigation Grant Program to replace an existing culvert number 20 on Route 132 with a 12-foot by 7-foot box culvert or similar, with a town contribution of approximately $115,000.
Okay, so a second.
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, mercifully, I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that work. Thank you so much. It's very thorough. Thank you to their DPW director too for his work.
Yes, excellent work.
Okay, so I think we're gonna take a break, and why don't we take a long one and come back at 8? How's that sound?
Oh, sounds good.
Okay, thank you. See you at 8.
Okay.
Okay, resuming the select board meeting at 8:01. So we have 3 more. We have 3 more agenda items. One of which is the consent agenda, and the other one is future agenda items. But the next one is an executive session. So can I get a motion for that?
Yeah,
So
I'll do that. I move to enter executive session pursuant to 1 VSA section 313A3 for the purposes of the employment of a public employee, and to invite the town manager and finance director.
That's what it says. Yep. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any discussion? Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. I'll roll call. Marcia, how do you vote? Can you unmute and say no? Sorry.
Sorry, no.
Okay. Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Mary?
Yes,
Okay, and I'm a yes. Okay, so I'm gonna move people into the waiting room and we'll have the executive session and then I'll move you out when we're done. So I'm gonna go do that now with thanks. I think there's a far more sophisticated way to do this, and I'm so sorry that I don't know. Okay, is there a motion to enter public session?
so moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, public session at 9. All right, so no action on this agenda item. We'll move on to the next, which is the consent agenda. Can I get a motion for that consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Aaron. Okay, discussion. Marcia had a question about the Route 132. So can we follow up on that now? Rod, I think it's appropriate. Or Fielding, which
And
whomever.
the pumper as well, because that's a capital expense.
Sure,
Okay.
so go ahead, Fielding.
Yeah, so I'm going to hand it over to Fielding for one of our last educational moments about capital spending.
Yeah. Yes.
So I'll start with today's, the current AP warrant. That does include the first roughly 50% of the payment for the newest piece of fire apparatus that is coming out of the fire apparatus reserve fund. This was approved by you guys initially, I think it might have been 2.5 years ago at this point. You know, it takes a while, even in non-COVID times, to get a fire truck built and delivered. So this is the first roughly 50% of that expenditure. The fire chief is expecting the truck to be completed about the end of the year. That's maybe slightly optimistic. I think you would admit that, but that's when I would anticipate the second 50%. That is allocated and will be coming out of the fire apparatus reserve fund. In terms of the payment that you're seeing for excavation work, this actually has to deal with Tigertown. And this is a grant funded project for culverts. The amount we're coming up, I think, is about $216,000. This is an 80-20 grant funded project. And so currently, the way we pay for these grant funded projects is we create an individual expense line within the general fund to pay out. And I guess I should preface this by saying that when we make a big purchase like this, especially that's grant funded, we have to pay the full amount of the project ourselves, and then we're reimbursed through the grant funding. And so the way we do this is we create its own expense line, its own revenue line, respectively. And so the expense line, we expense out of the general fund, pays for the project. We're then reimbursed to its own unique revenue line, which offsets that expense. And then if necessary, we'll expense the town's portion if needed to the specific reserve fund in question. So we're kind of halfway through that process currently. So
So-
we're paying the full amount. Well, I think there's a couple more bills coming in for it, but this is the meat and potatoes of it. We're paying that contractor now. That currently resides within the general fund. When we get reimbursed from the state, that will go to its own unique revenue line. Then the expenses and the revenue all get journalized to their respective funds if necessary.
So that one,
So I'm sorry, let me just, I actually have to interrupt both of you. So Mary Gorman has sent me a message. People are waiting to rejoin. Would you please allow them into the meeting? Everyone who's in the waiting room has been admitted. I don't respond to direct messages. I don't engage in sidebar conversations during an open meeting. Okay. But you've asked me to confirm receipt, so I have. All right, so I'm so sorry. So go ahead, Marcia. Did you have a follow-up question for Fielding?
yeah, so I guess there's a distinction between the culvert work right now, and I'm asking about the pumper, which would be coming from reserve funds. And my understanding and memory was that when the town votes for money, they say, we're going to vote this for the general fund, and we're going to put these bits of money in the reserve fund. And then when we subsequently buy stuff that's coming out of the reserve fund, there's a separate warrant for that. And that keeps it nice and clean and tidy. And so that's what I was wondering, why we're not having for those capital things that have a reserve fund, why they don't have a separate warrant.
I'm unaware of any statute that requires a separate warrant. What it does require, it does require your approval to spend any funds out of a reserve fund that have been allocated by the town. That does require your approval as a select board.
So just
that approval actually comes when, I think Alex came to you, or Alex and Herb came to you years ago and requested the purchase of this truck.
I'm just following them. I'm just following the money, that's all. And I'm thinking very simplistically, it should be coming out of the reserve fund and not getting.
You will see that. That will typically come and it's reflected when you receive the financials, the monthly financials. You'll see that expense post to the respective reserve fund as needed. So you can see it there, but I'm unaware of any policy or statute that requires an individual separate warrant.
I think I've just seen it.
In the past, that was a decision, that was an organizational principle. We had done that. It's just different.
Okay.
Right? I'm trying to uplift what Marcia is saying, which is like in the past, we've signed warrants that way. We don't,
it's certainly possible to do. It's not.
So I think the question has been asked and answered, but thank you. Okay, so any other discussion on the consent agenda? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Okay, future agenda items, 10, so it's 9:07, we're an hour over. Let's take maybe no more than 15 minutes to discuss this, if that's okay. How's that?
Try it.
Okay. So the committee responses to select board questions, we can put them in a future packet. I think they've been collected kind of piecemeal previously. I'm not taking public comment right now. So if you're waiting, we need to finish this discussion and we'll get to it, okay? We can address your comment when we finish our discussion.
All right, the comments in reference to correspondence.
So, well, we have moved on from that agenda item, respectfully.
I know, that's why I had my hand up before you moved on. To make a comment to that agenda item.
I would like to move on if that's okay, but if
it's up to me, I'd say, no, it's not okay.
Well, it's not up to you. So I'm going to ask my board members, because part of the discussion we have to have right now is who wants to sort of referee this kind of conversation in the future. So board members, should I take this public comment?
Yeah, I think people have to be heard. And if it goes to correspondence, there, there it is. If Jan feels like it can go in public participation, I don't know, but it seems germane to
Yeah.
correspondence.
We literally structured our agenda to recognize that people might have more comments after public participation, because it's in recognition that we have an agenda and we're here to transact the business of the town, right? So
I would like us to get on with the business and have the public comment in the slot on the agenda for public comment. Is that how I understand it?
okay, Robin, Mary, quickly, and then I'm gonna.
I would also agree with that, but I think we should try to wrap up number 10 so that Jan is not waiting a long time.
Lovely.
Already,
Okay,
already waited a long time.
great. I agree. Thank you, board members. Okay, so as I was just saying, we'll get the committee responses to our questions as in a packet, a future packet, and discuss them. I think it would help if a board member looks at all of that and tries to find an approach for, common themes. Like someone should look at all of that and find a way to synthesize or the possible discussion of that.
So you're talking about analyzing the committee responses?
I think the future agenda item should, take the committee responses and give us, a board member should volunteer to give a brief summary of that for the benefit of the group.
I would volunteer to do that.
Okay, thank you. If that's, I think.
No one wants to fight me for it.
Yeah, does anyone want to fight me for that?
Want to fight me for that one?
No, I think we
No,
appreciate.
and Roger, have all the committees responded?
Yes, to my knowledge, all have.
Okay.
Some have responded just to me, some have responded to Miranda, so we'll get that together.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, yeah, all right. That's A.
Okay, next is a reorganization of the board. So I have a young baby at home. I'm pretty taxed. And so we need to have a reorganization, either just a straight up election of a different chair or a discussion on how we want to share these duties differently. So just really quickly, some duties that I perform. I draft the agenda with the town manager. I take on the inquiries from the press. Sometimes unique correspondence comes to me and I address it in a way that reflects the full group, which often leads to particular frustration of the person receiving my response, because it is inherently more generic than they wish to like, because you're representing a group. And then of course you lead the meeting. So in the past, really quickly, Claudette.
Council, talking.
And I deal with the attorneys quite frequently. So in the past, Claudette Berchou, who, as you know, was an excellent chair in leading a meeting. She had me. She was working in a role that didn't allow her to get away from her job when the press called. So as vice chair, I took that on for her, and she also incorporated me into some agenda setting. Early on when I was vice chair. So she had. So there is a way for a chair and a vice chair to share some of those duties. So I think there's a couple of things that I need to transition on. So I think this reorganization should happen the second meeting in October. Like for instance, I have to take a meeting with CATV or JAM to figure out how we're going to run a meeting and how to have their assistance, because I also run the meeting and run the Zoom. And some people come in and out of the Zoom a lot, so it's particularly challenging. So I think that's just really, that's just really sort of the cliff notes of the duties. And I'm kind of putting all of you on notice that I would, that with personal circumstances means that I have to step back from this role. So it's a lot to take on. So I think we should have a transition. So this time next month, either we reorganize or we have a conversation about how to share duties. Surely you can designate someone to talk to the press, for example. You should have some media training. They're very good at their jobs.
Well, I suggest that we divide it up.
Yeah, I didn't intend to necessarily like discuss this agenda item. I want to like put it on
Like have an agenda item.
that we have to do it, and that like
That we have
someone
to-
and people need to think about like they might want to see themselves in that role. I think, as I've alluded to with some of you, I think there needs to be a total different set of norms at our meetings. If you're someone who steps up a lot, you need to step back. If you're someone who steps back, you need to step up. And so in that way, we model different norms for the community as well. I think that's important.
Or we could just have a reorganization meeting. You know, new
Yeah,
people in the role and just take it over too. That's another way to do it.
Yeah, you just
Yeah.
make it-
Reappoint ourselves to whatever.
So I'm just saying, in a month, I need to
Okay.
I need to stop.
Well,
Sorry, no unceremonious. I thought I'm sure there's a lot else that we can say. Obviously, someone serves in this role when they are voted to do so, right, by their peers, by their board members. And I deeply appreciated that and really loved the work. I loved working with both sets of town managers that we have had. And I will miss working with Rod in my capacity as chair too. It's been a great pleasure, but it's also very time consuming. So someone else needs to work with Rod now. And that's actually one of the pleasures.
So why don't we have a meeting to reorganize?
Sure, we can make an agenda item. So the second week in October is what I proposed.
is Marcia, were you suggesting it would take more time than an agenda item? When you said a meeting?
Maybe not. Just put it on as agenda item, but give it enough time, because I'm sure people will have different viewpoints.
Right, well, we can think about it ahead of time. We've got our heads up. So, all right,
Yeah, and then obviously, like, so, normally when the chair is not able to perform their duties, then the vice chair steps in too. So, but I want, I don't, I'm putting that out there as well.
right. Well, I've also been chair before.
Right.
So somehow we'll reshuffle and try to make this work a little better. So, whatever way we all decide.
Right.
Okay.
So that was the clumsy delivery of 10B, but nonetheless, I think the point is made. But I really want to emphasize that there needs to be new norms. I think we just experienced earlier in preparing for this agenda item a complete violation of norms. And I think as I become a board member, Claudette wonderfully provided that level of support, right? Because she probably was chair when she was chair in an era of Zoom, right? She saw sort of like how difficult it was, and would often lend a hand to help move it along. So I'm very prepared as a board member to assist the chair in this space in that way, because there needs to be a complete new way of conducting our norms.
Okay.
Okay, so then C is for I just throw it to the group. Please feel free to suggest future agenda items for the future. Go ahead, Marcia.
More bridge and the personnel policies are really important. I'd like to get on those.
Go ahead, Aaron.
I mean, I'm not up to date on everything. I thought we had a thread on updating the IT infrastructure, particularly the web page. I'd like to see the sort of select board news feed thing that's appeared recently. I'd like to flesh that out quite a bit. Maybe have a calendar, a select board calendar that we could all refer to sort of lay out the work for the year, so that this public as well could see what the work for the year for select board is, and get caught up on all projects in that same place. So, and that place we could point them to the public to if they have questions that that we don't want to take the time necessarily to answer, but that are public, where public information can be found. So I think that we could do some work there, and I know maybe it's already in process, but that's an agenda item I'd like to at least get an update on.
It exists, but it didn't get kept up.
We can-
Trello.
We can, well, we can.
Yeah,
read
I
it.
mean, I think even something like that was also one of my responsibilities, right? But, you know,
That was a lot.
That was too much, I think, but yeah, but some thread, as Karen suggests, I think is reasonable.
And I think another thing that I think we should talk about in light of, you know, public records requests and Freedom of Information Act and other, and this website question of communication with the public is do we need more staff? You know, is that a staff position to do some of those things, or half a staff position, and then when you get into more staff, you get into, of course, the space in the building and questions of offices, and do we need to be looking at outside offices for some of the people in the building, whoever would be most appropriate to move. Of course, Tracy Hall is its own issue.
yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Mary.
I would like to have maybe even a special meeting where we are accessible to the public. And I don't especially want it to be personally that we're, you know, when you say question and answer, we're still bound by what we have to, you know, respect in terms of privacy of personnel. But I do think that the town is kind of upset right now. I feel like they feel like that we're walling them off from what's happening. And even if we all just sat in the same room and reminded ourselves that we're all part of Norwich, we're all trying to do a good job, you know, and just relay as much as we can. I do think there's some value in that. I mean, I'd offer to do it myself, but I'm not the board.
Right.
So
I agree with you, Mary.
I don't know if anyone else agrees, but I'm
Yeah.
feeling that.
Yeah, I agree with the principle. I just, it's very difficult to know how we would go about answering questions when there's so many tripwires in the way. I'm not familiar. It would be hard for me to do personally. I'm not really as up to speed as the rest of you are. So, but I'm certainly willing to participate.
I mean, look, like we were asked a series of questions, we posed answers, these answers were deemed unsatisfactory, they led to an extensive and uniquely large public records request, which we have made available on the website to like everyone. I spent the better part of my morning, you know, putting together a part 2 of the public records request, as did I know some of you. You know, I think you know, I think the question is, you know, just because you're not getting the information that you wish doesn't mean that the town isn't being open and transparent. There's like a real, and I think like we need, like that should just be the position of the board. Go ahead, Mary. Go ahead, Mary, and then Aaron.
I think that it's not only a matter of information.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter, I think it's almost more emotional. You know, I think it's a matter of trust. I think we've lost a lot of trust, and I think we were kind of compelled to do so by circumstances. But I do think there's value, even just all being in the same room, even if, you know, it sounds weird, but even being in the same room and not saying anything. I think it's always a matter of the specific information. So.
I agree with Mary.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's not a matter of specific information because that information is in fact available. People frequently come to the meeting to ask questions that they could have looked in the packet or previous, you know, town manager reports and found the answers to. So there's something else that needs to happen, and it needs to somehow be fresh and to be delivered more directly. And it could be that a sort of a news feedy kind of website piece where you could say, what's the latest on this project that was actually maintained and it was reasonably up to date, that had no more information that was in the packets, but had it digested a little bit, could help. But I think also there is the factor of being in the same room together, and Zoom doesn't help any with that. I believe we are potentially going to have to go back to public meetings in January. I don't know whether, and that's possibly something else we should talk about, is how that's going to work and where we're going to meet and what that will look like.
So on a very administrative level, I had reached out to the LCT and told them, I made them aware that the running of these meetings would need to change. And I asked them if they had the staffing capacity, because they also have challenges sometimes, if they had the staffing capacity to run hybrid meetings for this, for the town. Of course, an email led to a request for a meeting, and I haven't scheduled that yet, but I will. But I think
Does
the only thing
Does Rob have any opinion on this?
yeah, I wanted to hear him next. Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Red. Mary asked, do you have any opinion about what was the opinion you want? Just a future agenda items, Mary, or how to have a
Specifically on some sort of meeting that has an element of outreach to the public? Maybe it's a listening session, but some means, because I think there is just a growing sense of distrust, I think, of the citizens, that we appear to be very secretive and maybe not caring about what happens to our workers, and that the town services are not what people have expected, and people are a little scared. So is there some value, and maybe just call it a listening session? And people who don't, I mean, is Rob Gear still here?
I'm still here.
Yeah, right? Yeah, I just didn't
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
I just wanted to hear what Rob thought about that idea, and then I'll be quiet.
well, exactly. This is, but Mary,
Yeah.
you're illustrating the point of step up, step back. So
Step up,
like,
yeah.
so go ahead, please step up, Rob.
Yeah, so there have been a number of times where I've driven by, aside from wanting to say hello to Ron, have driven by and thought it would be nice to get back to meetings with the public again, that contact can be beneficial. Then at the same time, I recognize that I don't want to get COVID. And so, being very careful, and you have a meeting, you can't necessarily require people to stay masked. Who knows if that's appropriate, but getting back to being able to interact with the public, things can happen with a little more of an earnest interchange sometimes. What I don't like is when we get the same sort of situations in a public meeting where people come up to the microphone 5 times to make the same comment. That sort of all of a sudden makes the whole experience a little bit of a waste of time. But getting back to having a hybrid or fully public meetings, I think is a good idea. What I have noticed is our attendance, the number of people from the town who participate in these meetings has been consistently higher on Zoom than it was in person. And so does that make it more representative? I don't know. But
Okay. So I don't necessarily have a sense of future agenda items, but that's okay. I think what I had, we're gonna, but I'll refer back to this meeting when we draft something. Anything else? Any other questions about future agenda items?
Well, we did provide lists a while ago, and I can provide my lists again. I mean,
I guess I'll step back as a chair for a moment. It's just, I don't like when we have conversations like this together, I'm not really quite sure we all share the same provisional set of realities about like what our existing like staff is and what our existing capabilities are. Like I think I've routinely heard from like, people I love in the community of like, oh, you just need to, become more of a public information officer and, provide a commentary on your own meetings. And, I think like I have to say, and I really don't mean for this to sound uncharitable, but that feels like that's such an anti-intellectual argument to say, like, I don't know something. And so I need to perform obligations on someone else to inform me. That is like so like deeply unfair. And I think it's also unfair to ask it of the people who are elected to transact the business of the town, right? So it goes back ultimately to, I think, Aaron's question of resources and staff. And if you want to have like a healthy democracy where people are informed, where there are videos and podcasts and, complaint forms and a responsive website, then you need to provide the structure accordingly. And then you need to build it into a budget process that has the full agreement of the public. And so I get really quite cynical, I'm sorry to say, really quite fast when we take on even something as heavy as, fixing the distrust in a certain cultural moment. And I also don't necessarily think that the board created all of the distrust. I think it comes from the community house has to share in the culture that they have created too, right? In many ways, we are reacting or performing obligations in response to what has been created. So I have to call us all out here a little bit and say, like, we need to we asked our committees what their existing work plans were, in part to let them know that we don't have the capacity to do all of the things that you are doing, and they need more staff supervision. It was supposed to have a collaborative, light bulb moment. And I don't think it had that effect at all, but that's like another future agenda item. So I'm sorry to sort of like step down off of the chair role to just say, like, we got to like give ourselves free ourselves of some burdens, right? And then also provide the proper structures for what it is that we want to see. Go ahead, Marcia.
I'm sorry, I'm lost. I thought you were looking for agenda items and I was just offering to send. Sorry. If I missed the bloody obvious, I just don't know. I thought you were asking for agenda items.
I was just making a point that, I quite frankly, I didn't hear agenda items either. So I was responding to what I was hearing in the conversation. Go ahead, Mary.
Well, we do have categories. We have communication. We know that needs to be better. We know, I think we could probably agree that staffing, we do need more people to make that effective. We need to make changes to our communication structure, the web page and so forth. We do still have our categories of things that we need to work on. How we talk about them is a little rough sometimes, but I think we're good, but when we come up with agendas, we shouldn't just put it all on you. Like for the next agenda beyond this meeting, we're going to have to select some things out and carry it forward.
And yes, thank you, Mary. And my only point was, I don't think we have the I was trying to lift up Aaron's point of, we don't have existing resources to do the work that we want to see and what I think the community wants to see from us.
Right, but that's a goal in itself.
Yeah, I guess so. All right.
Big.
So thank you. All right. Anything else? And then I'll just
We'll go to the next.
Okay. I'll go to the next. How's that?
Fine with me.
The next is public participation.
Right.
So go ahead. Any members of the public who would like to make a comment? Go ahead, Jan.
Hi, Jan Lasbra, 95 Upper Pasture Road. So to go back, first of all, I just want to wholeheartedly support what Mary was saying about an effort to have a forum for accessibility and interchange. And I think there are certainly ways to do that where you don't have to be worrying about the tripwires of of personnel, HR problems, and you know, that it can be very positive. So I would encourage that. My comment before around correspondence, I had a question because I had read the select board's policy on dealing with residents' communications. And it says that you will take in correspondence, review them based on looking for 3 criteria, whether they're informational, whether they need a response from a delegated select board member, or deserve an agenda item. And that would be reviewed. The letters that came in would be reviewed to those criteria. And then, to quote the policy, the select board as a whole will respond accordingly at the meeting for which the packet is prepared. So the letter is in a packet and you would respond. And so I have a letter in today's packet that asks that I think deals with topics that, and it's HR policy kinds of topics, not people specific, but policies that go to the select board's statement. What are the policies? Where are they? That asks specifically for a response. And so my process question is, how does the board deal with that? How do you decide, oh, this is a correspondence that needs a response, it's an agenda item, or it's not, or it's delegated to a board member? So I have both kind of a content question on the letter, but even more importantly, a process question. Thank you.
I'll just answer the process question to date. And if like the way that it has correspondence has been handled in my time on the board, which is 4 years now, is when we look to have a substantial discussion about a particular letter of correspondence, like we make a motion to receive it separately from the consent agenda and then discuss it and then vote. So that, and you know, that has happened with this current board in the past as well. The purposes of having a consent agenda, which correspondence is a part of, is to have a larger, broader discussion. So everything that is listed in the consent agenda can be discussed as part of it. But generally the practice has been for someone to ask for it to be pulled. You know, some may characterize that work as messy. So it's messy in how sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. The particular changes that you're referencing to were Marcia's additions that she had asked for when she came on the board, and we like graciously accept them. But I don't necessarily think, I will speak for myself and say like, I haven't lived with, I didn't write them, so I haven't lived with them. I haven't internalized them in the same meaning that, you know, they may have, that they are written on the page as. The practice has been, they get pulled. There's a motion to pull it and it's discussed. We approved the consent agenda, which means that we received with thanks your correspondence. So I don't want to have a back and forth exchange. I hope you can appreciate that.
No, yeah, I understand that. And actually,
we're having a back and forth exchange. We're having a back and forth exchange. I know. I'm sorry. Any board members have any discussion before we leave? Go ahead, Cheryl. Do you have a public comment?
Hi, yeah, Cheryl Lindbergh, 59 Koch Road. I just, as treasurer, wanted to, you know, I know that you don't want an exchange, but I would like to be sure that there's a plan for the audit for the fiscal year ended FY22 with Fielding now gone, and is there some quarterly financial report for FY23 and coming in the next month that we'll be able to look at?
Thanks, Cheryl. Those sound like future agenda items for sure. So thank you. I think I think we definitely, we'll ask the specific question about the audit. For sure. Should definitely be part of his outboarding. Okay. All right. So anything else? Any board members?
No.
Okay. Good, Marcia.
Well, I was just gonna say that on occasion I have tried to pull documents, and we have discussed having particular responses, and they generally have come from the chair. We haven't assigned them to anybody, but that was kind of the intent when I brought that up initially, because I thought we needed to have more interaction.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second? Aaron, I think. Aaron, 9:39. Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you so much. Good night.
Good
Good night.
night.